Mixing with Mike, plugin of the week is the Universal Audio Helios Type 69 EQ and Preamp. This is the latest addition to the Unison collection of preamps and an update from the Helios EQ that you may already have in your collection, now as a legacy version. The origins of the Helios channel and EQ go all the way back to Olympic Studios in the late 60s. Back then, Olympic Studios hired Richard Svedem away from the EMI engineering staff at Abbey Road Studios and commissioned him to build a console that would come to be known as the Helios console. This was later branded by Chris Blackwell, who from Island Records, who funded the company or incorporation and later or subsequently the commissioning of custom-built consoles under the Helios brand. So what you have here is something that is really iconic in terms of sound. The artists that have recorded through this console at Olympic Studios include Led Zeppelin, the Beatles, Jimi Hendrix, Pink Floyd, The Who, Bob Marley, Queen, David Bowie, Black Sabbath, AC/DC. I think you get the basic idea of it. It's a legendary sound. What you have here is a very unique design in that this is a passive EQ, and most passive EQs are very clean and transparent sounding, like the Pultec EQ, and but this one is very aggressive, and especially in the mid-range frequencies and on the low end. So it has a lot of peculiarities to it, has some limitations to it, as do all of the vintage EQs and gear, but it really has a unique and powerful sound, and I think Universal Audio has done an amazing job to really capture it. So what you have at the beginning stage here is a mic line switch, and you have step gain and attenuation settings. Now you can instantiate this in the Unison preamp slot on your console, and when you then switch to mic, it will actually use the variable impedance mechanism that's built into all the UA interfaces that have the Unison preamp that will make it automatically switch to the same impedance settings of the original hardware. So it will work along those lines. So that you're aware, when you do move the gain stages up or down, that gain does actually happen. So in some instances with plugins, you'll get a thing where you move the gain up, but it gives you the coloration without actually adding in the level. It does so here. So if you're going to move up to the next level here, make sure that you pull the fader down here to compensate before switching it in. Just a little quick advice on that. But yeah, the mic line setting, when you're in the mic setting, you have a 20 dB pad. That also can be helpful in terms of getting some tonal coloration if you want to do that. There's a phase inversion switch, which works down here. The EQ switch, this is kind of interesting. The EQ switch, if you take it in and out, you'll actually hear a difference in the sonic character of the sound, and this is true to the original. There are some somewhat unique types of things. When you switch some of the settings in there, you'll get gain differentials, boosts at different frequencies, all kinds of odd things. And so the UA emulation is true to the original hardware in that regard. It wasn't a perfect thing, but it had a classic amazing sound to it that sometimes it's not worth messing with it just for the sake of getting something to be, perfectly flat or unity gain, So let's move on right into it. Just go through some of the settings here. So you have a high frequency boost that comes in 4 dB steps or attenuation steps. That's at 10 kilohertz. So it's fixed at 10 kilohertz. There's no way to go in between there. So those steps are true to the original. You have a mid band that's either a peak or a trough, meaning that you can boost or attenuate. So if you flip to the trough setting, even with no gain, you'll find that there'll be maybe a small dip in level. That's again true to the hardware, but you have frequencies from 700 up to 6K, so it gives you a pretty broad range of frequencies. When you actually start to boost, it will start off as somewhat of a soft, wider cue, but as you push it up more, it'll start to narrow and become more focused. And that's just a characteristic sound of the Helios EQ. Down on the bass side here, so when you select the frequency, you can actually find the frequency. If you wanted to attenuate, just switch it to the trough, and it would attenuate by the same amount. So essentially, this is a peak or boost, depending upon the switch selection. On the bass side, you have 4 different frequency selections. Now, this gives you a peaking EQ, not a shelving EQ, just so that you're aware. So within those 4 selections, you'll notice here that the gain trim, it actually clicks out of a position here and then immediately gives you 3.3 dB of gain. Again, true to the original. So if you notice like an excessive boost and thinking, oh, I'm just barely moving it, that is true to the hardware. So you get a significant amount of booster gain just straight away from it. And then obviously you can select the frequency here. Now, if you go to below this 0 point, then this attenuation or boost knob here becomes inactive. And what happens is you have a shelving EQ fixed at 50 hertz. And so essentially, given how low that is, to some degree, it just becomes something more along the lines of a high pass filter as you go down, and it will just kind of shift the Q up in frequency so that if you wanted to do some trimming of low end, you could also do it from here. In general, and this is true with a lot of vintage EQs, and I find in working with this is that most of the time I end up boosting with it and then just making up for the gain. And so the attenuations come from the frequencies that you're not boosting in a way if you pull down the gain to kind of create unity gain. So just to give you a quick idea of what this sounds like, right? So no gain. We'll just make sure that everything is zeroed out here. What you can hear just from me putting the EQ in and out is you'll hear a difference right away. Again, true to the original hardware. Now, part of this is preamp coloration. So, and I could play around a little bit with this. I'll just start with this and then we'll go into some of the individual settings. So I'll pull this down to -10 and push this up to here. And let's see if we can do a little A-B there. See how that really opens up the sound. And then here I'll pull it down to -20, flip it up here to +40. Right, and obviously you could start to hear that it's starting to drive some distortion here, and it'll just get bigger. So you can go in and you know, run a parallel or do a complete destructo mode type of thing if you want to. One just quick thing here, if you switch to the mic on the lowest setting, it does create about a 5 dB differential. So just quickly A that. Okay, so you could hear a little bit of that there, and then obviously if I turn this up by 10 dB, or you know what I could do here is flip in the pad. That'll give me a little bit more headroom, so I'm not going straight into distortion here. And then I guess I end up pulling with the 20 dB pad. Excuse me, I think I'm mixing it up here. You get more or less some tonal colorations. Are a little spazzed out on the math there for a second with the +5 thing, but wanted to be safe anyway. But just as a quick note, just so you could see how the tonal variations there and how the -20 dB pad can really help you to you know, kind of use it. So let's get into some of the settings here. I'm just going to bypass this for a second and open up one thing here. This is actually a bass part that that I had just mixed in, and all I did was just threw in a 60 hertz boost. You know, not a huge boost there, but a pretty heavy boost there at 0.7 to kind of bring in a little bit of edge. Ran the preamp up to 30 here, so I compensated both for the amount of EQ boosts that I'm adding in and also the gain that I'm adding up here on the preamp. And what's really cool about this boost up here at 10K is it can really act like an air type of thing, especially on instruments like basses and instruments that have super low end. So as long as there's not like a problem with hiss or noise or anything like that, what it could do is it can add, it's hard to describe it, almost like shining a light on something that's really dark and kind of open up the sound. And this is really amazing at doing that. The Pultec is also quite good. I'm not sure if that's a necessarily or specifically a characteristic of passive EQs, because I didn't even know this was a passive EQ just based on the way that it sounded until I read some of the information on it. So let's take a look at this one here and see, just a kick drum here just to show you what I'm doing here on this. So what I have here is a boost at 60 hertz, nothing significant. Again, I'm kind of bringing the gain up here, but let's take a closer look. So you can hear on this end, I just have a boost up here at 10K again for that kind of air. Just getting the attack in a warmer place here with the 700 boost, and then again down at 60 cycles. So I'm pushing a little bit of that, and then I also have here, let me just zoom out, make sure I have the right thing, just a snare drum and some hi-hats. So on the snare drum, I went to the mic settings just to get a little bit more grit and edge out of it here with the 20 dB pad kicked in. Similar type of thing with the hi-hat, a pretty significant boost here at 1.4 and on the top end. And really, as you go from instrument to instrument, you can really play around quite a lot, you know, with this, you know, with something like the bass moving around. You could hear it a little bit on the mix bus when it was going through the different preamp settings, where you can start to overdrive it or push it a little bit and find that sweet spot. For me, I kind of liked where it sat with the line setting at around 30, but you could really play around with that. It gives you quite a broad range of frequencies. Or just sonic palettes to kind of tonal colorations, maybe is the better way of putting it, I guess. Here's one with the Rhodes track, and this really adds like a great richness to the Rhodes. One of the things that is always most difficult is getting a Rhodes to image well in the low mid frequencies, so it solidifies and kind of sits in a good place in the mix. Otherwise, they can really muck up or muddy a mix. And so what I have here is a 250 boost kind of to pull out some of that warmth, and a 1.4K boost here, just a significant boost there, just to kind of give the note, let that kind of cut through. Got a little bit of edge there on the top. Maybe it would have to back off away on. So you could hear there, I basically went through each of the different sounds, and I'm not going to just go through everything, but I think you got a good basic idea of what it sounds like, just the openness and richness and edge that it gives. And my first thought was actually to put up a rock track for this, and I didn't really have a good one available that I haven't already overused, so that's my reasoning behind that. But also, I wanted to show how, even bringing in like a hip hop beat, how valid this is, even in the current market. Not just, although all these classic rock records were made there, and that was a signature sound from Olympic Studios and the subsequent studios that went on to buy Helios consoles. And the list of artists that have recorded through them, it's phenomenal. It's really unbelievable. But there's something more here. There's a characteristic sound here that carries off into modern productions, and getting that rich, really powerful low and low mid energy that really resonates in images in a very strong way, and having that EQ in the mid range that has that grit and that bite to it. And between the controls of the preamp, the whole sound through it, the EQ, and the way it works, it's just really, really amazing. I'm really blown away by this in terms of just everything that it does. I whipped this together, pulled up this track, and put this together in about 15 or 20 minutes and just dialed things in, and it just really came together fast. So it's real easy to work with. And sometimes analog gear can be that way when you start digging in, where you have limitations with the settings, so you really can have to piecemeal your way through it with the settings that are available. And it really captures that signature sound of the Helios console. Really amazing. So Universal Audio, as always, does an amazing job. And the Helios Type 69 EQ and preamp is Mixing with Mike's plugin of the week. Well worth it.